You have now entered the agency. I'm your host, Mensah Bey. My hair's kicking up. And this is a video talking about assessing your art career. Um, I came up with this idea, thinking about this after moving to California and kind of having to reset and restart and rethink what it is that where it is that I am as an artist. Uh, and how moving affected that. And I was going to do like a two-part kind of videos, kind of documenting or expressing like what my life has been or what my experience has been moving to California and its effect on my career. But I want to keep this focused on assessing your art career and defining for yourself where you are within your art career. And that's the important part to take away is like where you are in your career is it's still always up to you and where you're looking to go, what you define as success. And so the goal here would be to kind of break down some very general ideas. None of this is official, but just general ideas to help define, to help you kind of place where you are in your career. And so actually, this what also reminded me of this was a book that I read or listened to, an audiobook, Mastery by Robert Greene. So I suggest a reading if you want to check that book out. I think it's really good. It breaks down multiple disciplines and defining the idea or the concept of mastering. Getting your 10,000 hours in on a what is it? Getting your 10,000 hours in on any particular skill or trade that skill or talent that you have. And in listening to the book, I was working on a show at the time, and so in listening to the book, I was able to take what I was hearing, and even in all those different disciplines, some of it being art, but they talk about Manny Pacquiao in there as well. But in breaking down where each of those people that were featured in that book were in their careers at certain points, it was able to help me define where I was in my career. And I was fresh off of my master's program at Norfolk State University, and so that title of getting your master's of art or master's of fine art for mine gives you that title, and so it was perfect for trying to compare the concept and idea of mastery with what I had just experienced or through going through that additional schooling and education. And so it helped me place myself and helped me see kind of the world around me and how things move, how certain pieces move. So I want to get into that content now. So I kind of broke it down into three major categories of artists. And again, not official, but it's just to give you an idea of where where to kind of rate yourself in your career. So I break it down as the student, the emerging artist, and the established artist. Wide range groups you can fall in. You can define anything you want in between that. They're all kind of murky terms in the art field. Emerging artists, I was just talking to my guy Tommy Mitchell, and aspiring artists is a term that it can be confusing. What am I? Emerging artist is another one of those. You get a lot of calls that talk about emerging artists and trying to define for yourself where you are if you're trying to like apply for it. It's like, am I established? Am I emerging? Am I a student? Like, where am I in my career that I should be able to apply participate in this project? So I'm gonna just break it down one of those, each of those at a time. And this is the focus of this is going to be on like traditional art. And traditional exhibition or exhibiting artists, but this can be applied to many different disciplines within the art field. So whether it be like a designer, graphic designer, or even in the fashion, you could probably relate it to music as well, and in many fields. And this is how I learned as well, like looking at other disciplines and determining where people are in their careers and relating their experiences to where I was or I am, and being able to say, all right, I'm catching up to them, or I'm right in line with this other person in this other field. And so the student, who is the student artist? So the student artist to me is someone who's exploring materials, someone who's exploring materials, exploring concepts, learning the basics. What is it? developing in your skills, and so you don't have a real, you might not necessarily have a real hold on the medium and the materials that you're learning. So if you know that you painting or drawing, or being an illustrator, or even designing, it's like, if you're designing, you're just learning the programs. If you're painting, you just got your first set, or it might not even be your first set. It might, but you're just exploring with the medium, trying to figure out, trying to get some ideas out, trying to get the feeling out. And so a lot of what you're experiencing, what you're looking for out of art and being a creative, is just that. It's the creation process. It's creating the artwork, defining for yourself whether you feel good about it or not. You often work in solitude, and so you're not really that comfortable sharing what it is that you're creating, because you don't have the confidence. You might not have a cohort there to help you move along or suggest. But because you're a student, you're either learning on your own and trying to figure it out, or you might be a student in school where you are forced to deal with more critiques and things of that nature. And so you do get that feedback, but again, you're still exploring materials. One major thing is you might not have much of a exhibition history at this point, because again, you're working in solitude. You're not sure what to do with the artwork, how to even exhibit it. You don't even know the spaces that your art could be in, but you might be familiar with people who are in those spaces, so you might start to begin to ask those questions. And so you're not fully committed to the art maybe at that point. You're trying to determine if you aspire to pursue an art career somewhere within that space. And so you're really just looking for something to grasp you. And so you might start painting things or drawing things that are familiar. The things that are around you. What people often tend to do is, I think we all do, is we imitate what we look at and what we see. And so I was talking to another artist recently. He was saying that he was drawing magazine covers and cartoons or comic books, and same with me. Like, I was drawing Dragon Ball Z early in my life and career, and drawing all kinds of anime characters. None of that was my style. I was just honing my skills. Didn't know that I wanted to pursue art at the time, but I was invested in and interested enough to continue to pursue it. And by the time I got into college and was doing that, like, I was somewhat exploring more ideas. But like, I had very strong beliefs coming into college, undergrad, about the types of things I wanted to maybe create or talk about, the world around me. I remember I created a series for one of my drawing finals. I think it was my drawing 3 or advanced drawing final. It was a series about like the path of a person being affected by technology, right? And watching TV, taking on what they see on TV, and it was called like infectious, not inspiration, infectious influence. And so it was like a 6-part series where there was the child who was kind of influenced by technology, like TVs or whatever, watching TV and seeing what they see on TV, and then following that, like kind of getting into drugs. That was what I took it to, somebody who got into the drug game. And so then, like, on one of the pieces, there was a guy, like, he was getting like put in handcuffs, and then you saw his like iPad, and on there was a song that was like called crack music or something like that. So it was about still like the influence of technology, or the influence of television, really, and media, suggesting not having a family at home, or more so. And so it was that idea. It was me. I was able to explore those ideas, but I was exploring mediums and materials that I wasn't really that familiar with at the time. So I always had the strong beliefs toward these things, but I didn't feel like I wasn't calling myself an artist at that point. Well, not to the degree that I do now, but I knew that I was in school for art, and I had these ideas and beliefs, but I wasn't that certain about what it was. So you might not have, as a student, like much of an exhibition history. Like, all of any exhibitions I did was right there at the school. It was things that were kind of handed and gifted to me. So it was just to give me the experience of exhibiting my works. And so probably my first major exhibition might have been my senior exhibition in undergrad at Hampton University. where I had, and even then, like I was a graphic design major, so I had this odd mix of, artwork that still reflected some of my beliefs and ideas, but it was over a vast array of materials and mediums, so it looked a bit confusing, or it could look confusing, even though the content might have looked familiar. It wasn't honed very well, and so that takes me into the emerging artist, and so I felt like this was a very long phase, or can be a very long phase, but minor maybe compared to the established artist, because by the time you become an established artist, like that's what you are for the rest of your life. So, but in comparison to maybe the student phase, depending on, if you go to school for art and say you just do 4 years, that's 4 years of being a student, not including maybe like under high school or anything like that. But when you decided to really explore art as a path, a career path, or at least to take it, to school, that's 4 years. And then from that point on, you have to, that emerging artist. It also could feel difficult because you don't have that unit or whatever behind you to say, do this next. And so you're trying to figure it out. So it always feels longer when you're defining all of that stuff for yourself. So for the emerging artist, you're exploring maybe a select few mediums and materials. You might have been doing, like I was, graphic design, drawing, painting, whatever. But now you're like, all right, I'm gonna keep it down. I'm gonna explore painting, and I want to explore, it might even be a specific paint, as opposed to going from acrylic to watercolor to oil. You might be like, all right, I'm just sticking to acrylic, and you're starting to understand why you're using acrylic, how you're using acrylic. You're starting to get a set, you might be, honing that subject matter a lot more. So now you're like, all right, I want to paint these type of images or these type of concepts. And so this happens, I say this phase, what you might see a lot of in this phase is I was going to explain earlier, like people go to what they are most familiar with. So like I was doing, comic books. A lot of people go to celebrities. Celebrities are very easily accessible imagery. It's relatable imagery, so it's a good way to test and hone your skills. And because I think maybe just because the ideals of beauty and things of that nature, people tend to lean towards what's being presented to them. That's part of that infectious influence I was talking about earlier, though. So like, if you see enough of it, that's what you're going to be intaking, and so you might be looking to read, to duplicate those things. So you get a lot of that, and so you may be exploring your materials and mediums and focused in on maybe specific celebrities and things like that nature. So me, I generally always went to family or self-portraits, maybe a little narcissistic, whatever. But I generally always went with self-portraits. Like I always, even to this day, like I still explore myself before I start exploring, as far as like figurative work. I generally, whenever it's a new idea I have, I explore myself before I really go into exploring new subject matters or new subjects. And so you're beginning an exhibition history, right? You're starting to get an exhibition history. You might start participating in some, if you're in school, doing some student exhibitions or some local ones that you might find in the area that you're living in. So you're starting to get some local recognition potentially as you're emerging. You're starting to develop a personal and recognizable style. So even within the field of maybe say somebody who paints celebrities or illustrates celebrities, a lot of people might illustrate or draw them, but how you do it starts to come out. So even if you are doing those things, or you are painting these idols, so to speak, how you're expressing their how you show your way of expressing them is what starts to come out. So you might have a very specific way of painting your subjects that can be easily translatable to anybody or any other familiar or relatable subject. So at some point where you might decide to stop doing certain subject matters, or maybe you're just going to stop doing celebrities and you start doing women in your maybe a certain storyline. Let me do a series of women in my family or men in my family, something like that, or people you look up to that aren't celebrities or something like that. So and also, so exhibitions, right? So you might find yourself participating in, like, at this stage, the exhibitions that you're participating in might be either juried exhibitions that some organizations are doing, so you're getting 1 to 2 pieces in to a few shows a year, or you're doing maybe like small cafe shows, or kind of local businesses that support the arts and have exhibitions here and there, and you're catching wind of that. So a lot of this also has to do with how much more familiar you get with the art world and the places that art is seen, and how you can get yourself in those places. So generally, what you might know, like for most people, is like, I'm creating art, and that art ends up in museums. Or you might, be in a city like Philadelphia where you see murals all the time. So you're like, I know art ends up on walls, but you don't know how to fill that gap. It's like, I want to make art. I see art in museums, and I worked at the Christ Museum, and this happens a lot. Somebody will come in when I was at gallery host. Somebody will come in, walk to the front desk, and be like, "Who do I need to talk to get my art in here?" And you're like, yeah, there's no real answer to that, because that in the museum world, it doesn't happen that way. But when you don't understand or don't know how to reach that level or how to fill that gap, you're kind of naive to it, and so you're just like, is art in here? I make art, so I should be able to get my stuff in here, right? Who do I need to talk to make that happen? And this even happens with collectors who are like, I want to put some artwork in my collection. Maybe the museum can appraise it or something like that. It happens there too. But so for the emerging artists, it's important to know where your art could or should be existing at that space. And it's not a bad thing. That's most of what I say. It's not a bad thing to say. I don't think anyway that your artwork should start and at a certain level, and kind of just walk the ladder, or walk the stairs, and take take the baby steps, as opposed to imagine that you're going to just shoot up. Because even for like in another field or discipline, like you start making music and then you think, all right, I'm going straight to the radio and they're going to start playing my stuff and then I'm about to be hot. Or I'm making music and now I want to go do Coachella. Like you just made a song yesterday for the first time and now you're ready to go perform it at Coachella. But there's a gap that you got to fill. Like you got to build and understand, like build an audience, practice, perform, understand how to move a crowd, how to control a crowd, and your music also has to be good enough for that. So in the same way with art, like you have to kind of work slowly and build up that reputation. And so for the emerging artists, it's a lot of what you're doing is you're trying to figure out where your art should exist, and once you start to knock down some of those smaller spaces. Like my first solo exhibition was at FMC Cafe in Norfolk. It came through the guy who was curating the space had contacted me and was like, hey, I need you to put a show together in 2 weeks, or can you put a show together in 2 weeks, because this place doesn't like to have their walls empty of art. And so I just put it together. I had some illustrations and some paintings that I already done, so I started putting stuff together and did a show there. And it was a great reception. I was in school, so I was able to bring the student base there, but it wasn't a museum. I sold maybe 2 pieces from it, and that was that. It wasn't. The important part of that is treat it like it's the biggest show that the world has ever seen. That's something I had to learn, because I'm able to like familiarize myself with what where I am at a certain space. I tend to downplay what my accomplishments when I receive them or achieve them. And so I had my exhibit, and as much as you want people to show and be there, in my head I'm like, oh, this is just something small. I'm gonna just knock this off, check it off. It ain't that big, it ain't that serious, because of I wasn't totally aware of that I had really done the work to make it come that easy to me, more so. So it wasn't like it just happened for me. Like I had been doing the work. I was familiar with the person. I was kind of active on social media. I was doing what I had to do to keep myself kind of recognizable, and people acknowledge my work, so that when it came time for something like that, I was ready and I was prepared, and I just hadn't acknowledged that I had really done the work to make that happen that easily. But it was more so like when you set a goal, and by the time you achieve the goal, it makes sense because you did all the work and it didn't happen overnight. So had the exhibition, and then you had to get, my professor at the time was like, hey, did you call your family? Is your family coming down to the show? Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I'm not going to bring them all the way down from Richmond just for this little show. That's how I was looking at things. But it taught me a lesson to do that. And one thing I know about my family is that they always show out if I invite them or if they come. If we do anything together, we're going to show out and support. And that was the most important thing to me, because by the time I had the exhibition and by the time it was the time for the reception, all I cared about was that they were there. So I really think once they were there, I didn't care who else was there, really. I had, my family unit, and that was what was important to me, is that they were there and that they supported. So I was happy with that reception. So I had learned my lesson behind that, as far as like inviting my another thing that happened like that is like there was a show at the Chrysler Museum before I worked there, and I created a piece for the exhibition because it was in collaboration with my school. And again, I was just like, oh, this in my head I was like, this came too easy, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just one piece in the museum. It's not like the museum came to me to have an exhibition, but in reality, it was still an exhibition that I participated in at the Chrysler Museum, and it was a very nice piece. And so I had to be reminded again at that point, or that happened first. So I had to be reminded then to invite your family, let them know that like to participate in this, and it was helpful it's helpful to bring your people along, whoever you can, so they can understand and watch that growth, and so they're not surprised at the end, so they can they can understand the levels that you're growing, and they can feel a part of your growth and not just be like, what are you doing over there making art? So you want them to be a part of that, so they understand your success as you get there. So that's really about it for the established artist. You might start, at this point, you might be getting commissions and things like that. You might be doing a lot more commissions. This happens in the graphic design space as well. You're getting commissions and things of that nature. So your commissions might not be feeding your artistic interest. It might be like somebody's wanting you to do a portrait. I was having this conversation. I have this conversation all the time, but like when it comes to commissions, if you have a very unique style that isn't the most relatable necessarily in like portraiture, that's what most commissions you're going to get is going to be might be in portraiture. And so if you're not a portrait artist, but somebody's like, oh, you're an artist, can you paint this or can you draw this, you might be capable of it, but it's not your interest to do it. So but at this point you might be just looking for an opportunity, so you might be taking it because someone's asking you to do it. And I've done my fair share of those projects, but I've been a very selfish artist for myself, and when it comes to that, to where I haven't done so much that I've made bread and butter off of it. I've always explored my own artistic interest to be like, I want to create what I want to create, and I really don't want to create anything outside of my style, because I feel like it would hinder me to focus so much on doing something that's not enriching to me. So as much as I'm exploring the concepts of color and figurative illustrations or paintings, I want to do it in my way. So as the emerging artist, you might be saying yes to those opportunities as opposed to no, where you might find the established artist. So now I'm gonna jump into the established artist, and this is I think the emerging established kind of murkiness is a place where a lot of people might feel that they're at, because they might have that style, they might have it down packed, they know what they want to do, but then they don't feel like they have that success to consider themselves established, or they're not able to eat or live off of their art. But I think the established artist group is one of the larger groups, because you spend most of your life as an established artist. Once you consider yourself an established artist, the rest of your life from that point on, you're established. So there's no more student phase or emerging. You're doing this for the rest of your life at this point. And so for those who pursued it at early enough age, you're going to spend most of your life as that. Not to say that, but there's plenty of artists that may explore and come into art later in their life, and do it until the rest of their life, in which that might be they might do start art in their 40s. I mean, not 40s, but in their 50s or 60s, and pick it up and hit it off. But I say this group might be the largest group, because at this point you've starting to define what success is for you as an artist, and that can only be done by you as the artist. And so the same way this kind of focuses on traditional exhibiting artists, that's more so my lane and my focus, the studio practice, and creating artwork, putting on exhibitions, doing murals. But that can, that group can sway so few degrees for each person, that what you're looking for might be different. Well, some people might be looking for the history books and fame, and wanting to reach that level, which I would consider like the super elite established. It's cool. The super elite or super established, and then you have someone who just is I'm just trying to support my lifestyle and my family with my art, and I'm good with that, and I'm gonna keep working it at this level. But that changes. So let me get into some of the notes and then bring it back all around. So when it comes to materials and mediums, at this point you have a sure mastery of the materials and the medium that you're working, and even the subject. And so that and what's most important is that you develop, at this point you have such a unique style that if it does explore other mediums, it still resonates as your original work or your style. So that if I was this occurred with me actually to some extent, to where I started exploring, I'm a 2D artist primarily, but I got into a space where I was able to explore 3D designing. And so even though I haven't really worked with maybe necessarily clay or sculpture as much, in the virtual reality, I was able to duplicate what it is that I like to do as an illustrator or painter, more so as an illustrator. I was able to duplicate that in virtual reality and then produce that as a 3D object. If I run and go get this example, you'll understand. Wasn't that fast? See, I was gonna show a picture, but I realized I actually had the thing with me. This is a necklace my brother got me for Moore's holiday, but I don't really wear neck pieces, so I figured why not put it on the neck of. Oh, I forgot I did this. This is so fun. In between here. Oh, I'm bugging. Let me just take it off. So, what I'm getting at is, so I established enough of a style in my figurative figurative works that when I was working in 3D or virtual reality, I was able to duplicate that with the tools there to recreate my work to eventually be 3D printed. So we have this sculpture here, which I think I called it, he used to have 4 arms, it was called 4-arm agent, but he's a 3-arm agent now, so this arm here fell off. But so this is a 3-arm agent, to where I was able to recreate my work in a 3D space, which was, it's fantastic. If somebody can get me in a virtual reality program where I can do more of these at a larger scale, please holler at me. I'm down for it. I need more. I have a larger one that I did that wasn't an agent style, but still exploring 3D. I was really exploring this medium a lot more than I was exploring my style, but still exploring the same subject matter as far as virtual reality versus reality or physical world. So again, like I said, that's control of your medium, control of your subject, to where it can expand into other mediums, but it's still your work. And so you're starting, again, your exhibition history is probably getting way greater. You probably, at this point, you've done from small cafe shows up to whatever you might have, 20 to 50 shows that you participated in. You more than likely have the documentation of your work that's very important. So in the emerging phase, you might realize that the more you're participating in this stuff, the more you need certain documents. And so at some point, you're going to say, let me just create these default versions of all these documents, and I can just build on it as I grow. And so as an established artist, you're going to have that. You might have a website these days. You have a website. I have a YouTube channel. Institution exhibitions. And so speaking for myself, right, where am I? That's the real question. But I mean, actually, because I said that's a good ending thing, so I'm going to come back to that. Uh, so yeah, might be doing institution exhibitions or kind of large festival features. Again, that's what I was saying. Like as far as exhibiting, there some artists who just do like the festival circuit, who aren't trying to be who aren't necessarily trying to get into museums and things of that nature. They create artwork more so for the sale of it, but also it's high recognition in some of these large festivals and large art fairs, really, to where that's their bread and butter. They create their works, they make prints of it or have small versions of it, small copies of it, and they just have this like low, pretty much low bottom shelf to top shelf version of their artwork, which mostly just based on like the price point. You might have smaller objects here, larger objects up here, and they run that circuit, and they get their bread and butter. They get their recognition. They're not really necessarily maybe looking for awards, but those things do probably come through from those spaces. But they work in that space. The same thing you could say for like mural artists. You start from maybe doing whatever somebody kind of working commission murals to having a very specific style of mural that you like, and so then you're participating or might be applying for murals in like your local area or nationally, and then you might start at the I'd say at established level you're getting a lot more invitations to participate in things, because people are recognizing who you are, what type of work you do, and so they want to explore and collaborate more than so there's more of a collaboration that occurs in that space. This is another one. So this is the big one, really, for me. Before I get to that, you're probably building a collective base and have patrons at this level. The established artists might have large companies that collect your work. I did work at the Norfolk Southern, where they had a huge collection of artwork from living to non to dead artists or past artists. So that can easily exist. But intentionality, right? As an established artist, you start to get intentional about where your art exists, and so you're saying a lot more no's to projects that don't fit what it is that you're creating or what it is that your artwork is about, and so that might even be turning down deals because it just doesn't fit what it is that you look to do. One artist that I look up to, B. Mike Odoms or Brandon Odoms, B. Mike, he out of New Orleans. I remember watching his career early on through the eyes of a friend of mine who he knew while she was in New Orleans. But my experience was him as a mural artist. He was kind of going, his thing was paint where it ain't. He was going in and finding locations where he could put up murals, or pretty much create these large scale graffiti style murals. And with his team, he built up such a reputation in New Orleans that when people were coming to town, maybe for like Essence Fest or big events, they were showing up to see his artwork, or getting him recognition that way. And so he had he built his studio out where it's kind of an abandoned factory space. We built a studio space there where he had his first show there. And I think the intent was just to do a one-time show in and out, but then he was able to procure the space and use it as a place for more than just him to create or exhibit his work, but to workshop really and bring in assistants and have children come in and learn more about the arts, host events for different programs, things of that nature. And so he was able to build up his career in that space, to where he was able to book or look like he collaborated with the museum down there, I think at Loyola, and do a major exhibition of his works there. And so he was very intentional, I think, early on in where he wanted his artwork to be seen, and as he built up his experience, and I was able to work with him, which was kind of a great full circle. I was able to work with him at the 2019 Something in the Water Festival in Virginia Beach, where I was selected. He was curated the artists that were selected participate as mural artists for that festival. So being intentional about where your art exists, and being able to say no to certain projects, right, or ideas. Also, as an emerging artist, side note, you're probably going to start getting hit with a lot of scams around then, and you might watch my other video on that. Beware of the scams. I got an art scam video where I talk about an experience I had. So that's something that you just gotta have to like deal with or face once you start to make yourself recognizable and accessible. Scammers show up, and it's not a good experience, so it's easy to like detect. I talk about that, but talk about ways to detect that. That's off subject. So back to established artists. Where am I? That's what I want to get to next. I had some other notes like healthy comparisons. So as I was just talking about, like B. Mike Odom's, having healthy comparisons with your peers helps you to define where it is that you feel like you are, and being able to like talk to your peers and ask them where they feel about where they are. So having people, it's a matter of like, you're going to do it regardless. You're going to have the people that you look up to. You're going to have the people that you feel are at your level. And then you're going to have the people that you feel like you can educate or bring up behind you. And it's based on, it's not looking down on people or anything of that nature. It's recognizing that you've experienced what you see them experiencing. And so you're able to say, hey, I see where you're at. How can I help elevate if that's your interest? Or if you see someone that's doing things that you want to do, you simply just start to ask, how do can you teach me some things? That occurred with me, where a young artist who I thought was fantastic and fabulous, and still is. I purchased a print of his work, and he kind of reached out to me afterwards saying, hey man, can you kind of give me some game? Because he thought that what I was doing was inspirational. And so I was like, sure, no problem, And so I tried to start inviting him out to things, but in reality, I was looking at him almost the same. Like it might have just been because I had the know-how, or I knew more about how things played out and existed. And I was able to I might have been defining, or being more intentional about where I wanted my work to be. But I thought that the way that he was going about it as a young artist, like the way he was going about it, was perfect for where he was at, because he was getting his name out there. He was getting his attention. I believe he was selling his work, and so he was doing a lot of, and still is, doing a lot of that. And so like at this point where we're represented by the same gallery at this point, so that all happened within like maybe 2 years, I think. But where am I, right? Where am I as an artist? Where do I define myself, as established or emerging? Really, or wherever. And truthfully, I think I'm like tiptoeing established, honestly, because I have such big dreams and goals of where my art should and can exist, that establishment, or feeling like an established artist, I feel like I'm established in different ways. Like as far as my artwork, I feel like I'm established in what it is that I create, my style. But as far as in my career, I feel like I'm still emerging to some extent, because there's, for one, like I was mentioning earlier in this video, I moved over the last 5 years. I did a lot of work in Virginia, in the 757 Hampton Roads area, in which how I define myself as an established artist looked a lot different. But because I moved, that gave me a kind of a second look at where my career was. And so now I get to look at my career as a national or international artist, and not necessarily maybe a local regional artist. And my goal is to reach those higher heights, to where my art is recognized for its its effect on history or society, or its reflections on history and society. And so coming in and establishing myself in a new space is important to me. So that's why I'm like, I have to, once I feel like I define myself or establish myself in this new space, but do it at a more national or local level, because I don't want to repeat what I was doing the last 5 years. So I want to grow from that. And so, I'm a lot more intentional even here, understanding what I want to accomplish in my first year here compared to my first year in Norfolk, and then how to grow that from this point on. So so established as an artist, style wise, yes, I feel established. Even though I'm still exploring, still like enjoying the creative process. I think you have to maintain that as an artist to continue to reinvent yourself. But the way I go about that is honed. You know, I'm not all over the place about it. It's, you know, the artwork. I know it's wrinkled, but you know, the artwork that I wear on my shirt is still reflective of the artwork that I make on canvas. And the artwork I make on canvas is reflective in the artwork that I might sculpt. So the artwork that I create is very honed. So I'm established in what it is that I like to create and what it is that it means. And so it's just a matter of, for me, so sorry, it's just a matter for me at this point defining and finding where it is I want my artwork to continue to exist from this point on. And you know, I've being in a museum collection is a goal of mine, or multiple museum collections, but you know, it's one of the major ones. Making it into a museum collection, you know, even large company collections, because I know now that I know these places exist. You know, it's kind of a space that I want my work to be. So, you know, getting my work into collections of getting my work into collections of institutions, and doing like, you know, more solo or duo exhibitions that I'm defining the content that's being exhibited and not necessarily fitting the theme of someone else. You know, I want to tell the story and my story specifically, as opposed to there being like a group exhibition and I'm just submitting some of my work that fits the theme or narrative that they put out. Even though sometimes because they might relate, but I want to show a body of work I want to continue to show bodies of work that say that this is how I'm exploring this vast idea through my perspective and my understanding. So I'm gonna cut the video there. I try to make it shorter, but you know, I can be long-winded because that's what I got this channel for, to talk, to holler at you. So this is also a warm-up for a conversation I plan on having on Clubhouse. I'm on Clubhouse now, so you can find me Mbeyarts at most things. Mbeyarts. But that's it. Again, suggested reading Mastery by Robert Greene. Really good book. Really, really good book. To get a hold or an understanding of what it is to master a craft. And one thing I'm gonna leave out on is I talked about this with Tommy Mitchell as well. And so like they say that 10,000 hours will gain you mastery of any specific skill that you put the time in on. From my understanding, that just gets you to the first degree of mastery. And so just like in black belt, you might go and get your black belt, and then you reach the black belt level and you realize there are black belts that have multiple degrees at that point that are gonna, give you even more gain. But what reaching mastery does is allows you to understand how to attain that level of mastery, or that how to attain mastery through experience. It's not just saying, not being able to just quote it and say, oh yeah, 10,000 hours you'll get mastery. But when you have the experience, you can duplicate that to where anything else that you do after that in close relation to that discipline or field, you can attain mastery of the next level a lot faster, because you already understand. The basics are implanted in you at this point, or they're in you, so you don't have to go through step 1 through 9 anymore. You just go from 9 to 10 every time. You feel me? You get it? You understand? I think so. So I've almost reached my 10,000 hours on agents, so I realized in a few years I will have been doing agents for 10 years, and that just hit me the other day. So now I'm really looking at like what it is that my work is going to look like in the next 3 years, and being able to like understand that what I'm doing now is going to affect that. So I'm really looking forward to like the next 3 years of my life and what my artwork does and the places it exists. But to close it all out, I have some more videos coming. I got a list of people I want to pull out for the bring in for interviews. I got more content that I want to put out. So if there's any other like subjects or things like that y'all want me to cover in the arts, I will. I'm trying to start doing like some news stuff. So that's that. That's me. Another 45-minute video from Mbeyarts. Be sure to like, subscribe, and be notified. And until next time, out of here. Mbey's out of here.